things, doesn't matter what stage you're at, and I guess that's the CA in me coming out, the first word is always going to be plan, plan, plan. I think one thing that we're very, very weak on in the owner-managed business environment and that SME market is planning. It's a lot easier to just go day to day, bust your butt, go through that exercise than to actually sit down and think about our own mortality. Because most entrepreneurs, you know all too well, are never going to die. They're never going to get sick. They're never going to have to pass anything on. Nothing's ever going to go wrong, okay? Because they can't fathom anything not working properly. So a succession plan requires sitting down. For those of you that have, I'll make the similarity. For those of you that sat down with your spouses to do your wills. Now, in most cases, or in my case, my wife is like, don't talk to me because that means we're dying, that means somebody has to take our children, and that means I have to think about what happens tomorrow if it doesn't go well. Not much different when it comes to that succession plan. I need to sit down and say, Eddie, you know what? I'm sorry, but one day you will pass on. One day you're going to have to pass the business on to somebody else. What's going to happen? And in many cases, and I can't remember who I was discussing this with earlier, it might have been when we were talking a bit before, is in one case we had a client that had to go through that family business transition plan from beginning to end from the time we discussed it with him to the time he actually sat down to do the process was 36 months. Okay, so it was 36 months of go away, I'm not going to die, we're not talking about it, I don't have time for it. It's another 12 months later, I'm still not dying, look at me, I'm fine, I'm healthy, to eventually realizing that this is not about discussing his own mortality, but it's about discussing the transition and the continuity of a business at the end of the day. So the succession plan can take on many forms. It can be very formal. It can be as simple as sitting down on a cocktail napkin with some ideas and putting things together. Okay, it's the succession development and training. So if I'm going, especially if I'm going to go into the family business, I'm going to go into that transition within the family, there has to be some education along the way of the individual so that they understand what they're getting into, where they're going. It's one thing to have the conversation about the business at the table on supper on a Sunday afternoon. It's a whole other thing to come in Monday morning and have to deal with all the employees and all the people that are there and how that's going to transition. I've had a number of clients who have actually forced their kids to go work somewhere else for 24 to 36 months to get an education, to get a feeling, to get an understanding of what the work world's like without mom or dad protecting them or being too harsh on them. Because the reality is, if any of you have ever coached your kids in a sport, you're either far too harsh on them or you're far too lenient on them. Same thing happens in a business environment. So they'll go out, they'll work somewhere else, they'll work at a large company, they'll get the expertise of finding out that, you know what, not all bosses are nice. Of course, those of you that are bosses around the table are all nice, but practically speaking, not everybody's nice. And it's the whole exercise. Family meeting facilitations and conflict resolution. I think you're going to be speaking to the board concept. I think there's a lot of family businesses now that have gone the route of saying, okay, you know what, we need to have an external board made up of 3 members of non-family, 3 members of either lawyers, accountants, business professionals, it may be other entrepreneurs who are coming in and basically facilitating the process, helping the discussion, formalizing the exercise. Okay, and that's the biggest problem within most family businesses. There is very little formalization. Okay, and that becomes the hardest part when there's a move and a transition on to the next generation, an even harder part if at the end of the day there is no family to take over and you're going to then sell that business to a third party. The formalization, the corporate structure, the involvement of everybody is just, it's very, very difficult to deal with. Corporate governance, you know, big buzzword the last 3-4 years after, you know, the Enrons and everybody else have destroyed the whole world of accounting. Arthur Andersen's imploded. Companies basically had no accountability. Well, that corporate governance side, again, is something that goes to trying to speak to a formalization, rules and regulations by which the company will abide by. Very, very difficult, again, to instill into a family business environment. The bigger the business, generally the more formalization. So the bigger businesses are a bit easier, but that, you know, 3, 4, 5 people who then becomes 15, and those of you that deal with anybody or have businesses that have gone from 5 to 15 people, massive jump in culture, massive jump in frustration levels, massive jump in formalization. Take that 15 to 50, you're no longer everybody's friend, and it's very difficult to have that big family environment that you had before with everybody that's there. Obviously, business and strategic planning. Again, lovely word planning, and I'll throw it into number 6 as well, the estate tax planning side of it. Very big factor, again, when you use the word estate plan, entrepreneur, it's a big no-no. It means I'm dying, I don't want to talk about it. Any questions? Do I sufficiently load you all into a false sense of security? Most importantly, on a family business transition, are there kids? Are the children interested? Are they capable? Okay? And as I discussed before, should they work somewhere else first? That sense of capability is a very, very difficult assessment when it's your own family members. I'm sure none of you have ever boasted about how intelligent your children are. I'm sure none of you ever boasted about how good they are on the hockey rink or on the soccer field. It's hard to face the fact that we've got a business, we've been successful, and little Johnny or little Sarah just can't handle it. Either doesn't have the capability, doesn't have the intelligence, doesn't have the drive. Remember, family businesses, the success rate from generation 1 to generation 2 is not that good. Okay, you're probably talking about a 75% to 80% fail rate on the transition. Take that down a 3rd generation. You're down to about a 6 or 7 overall success rate. So you're now dealing with the hungry level of the entrepreneur who started. What do you want to do? You want to make your life for your kids a little bit better. Well, we make the life for the kids a little bit better, we take a little bit of the hunger away from them. Take the hunger away from them, we lose a little bit of that drive, a little bit of that transition of take the ball and run with it. And that really, I think, is part and parcel of trying to protect our kids. At the end of the day, we're doing them a service, but we're also doing them a disservice. Again, my favorite topic, we'll discuss some psychology. Obviously, no transition is simple. Psychology plays a major role no matter when, how, and where, whether you're selling to the family, giving to the family, selling to a third party. There's one thing that's associated with every family business. It's emotion. There's no cold cutting, this is it, A, B. There's always something in there. It's something that you've built, it's something you've developed, it's something that you've created. Well, all of a sudden tomorrow now I'm going to get rid of it. It's like losing a child. It's like selling the family farm. It's like, there's a huge, huge piece in there. Obviously, you need to understand the drivers of that next generation. If I'm going to be bringing in the next generation, or if I'm going to be selling to somebody who's younger, what's going to motivate them? Is it money? Is it the parking spot up by the front? Is it the name on the door? Is it the corner office? A lot of times when I started working, that whole discussion of the corner office. You're in the corner office. You're important. You've got the corner office. Well, that doesn't quite drive the next generation the same way. Yeah, keep the corner office. Give me 4 hours a week to go have some fun. It's a very different psychology. Obviously, the wants and the needs and the expectations are very different.